Well, there are several reasons obviously for that, but then Russian factor is really very important. So if we look back how it all started, basically, and how Russia started to be very active on that front, that really showcases that they've been very vocal about that. Ukraine is a very particular state. I mean, it's very big, it's very important for the EU, and then in terms of the society, obviously, there's a large part of the society that clearly sees itself as being a European country rather than being part of Eurasian Union, a country that would in any ways depend on Russia. Ukraine is too big for that, and it's sort of an ambition of being a European country. But then it has very complicated politics, and corruption obviously part of the political landscape. So that when we speak about Ukraine, it's not just logical way of looking into it, how one as a good politician in a country would think about options for the decision-making processes, basically, but then how much personal interests are part of the equation. And by that, I mean that for Yanukovych, as a president of the country, retainment of his power and wealth that his family accumulated, and then interest in terms of all the corrupt sort of schemes that have been created in terms of economy in Ukraine, is even more important rather than anything else, if to be frank on that, when it comes to the future of Ukraine. And this is the landscape where Russia has obviously an upper hand. So the dilemma started for two main reasons, basically, for Ukraine. One was, again, internal, in terms of the internal politics, and Yulia Tymoshenko's case was the biggest issue, obviously, with that as an internal political issue. In 2015, Ukraine has elections that are upcoming, where Yanukovych obviously hopes to be re-elected and retain his power. And he definitely sees Yulia as a challenge to him. But the fact is that he's very afraid of letting her out. And the fact that EU has been so adamant in terms of pushing this issue, being that one of the key actually issues out of the 11 criteria that has been given to Ukraine since the end of 2012, beginning of 2013, was more of an issue for him because his understanding was that the West wanted to get her out, so that by 2015 there would have been possibility of the change of the government perhaps with other political forces. So that's his way of looking into that. So he did everything that would enable him to squeeze by that criteria. They did actually quite a bit of the progress on other criteria out of the 11 criteria that the EU had given to Ukraine. It is important to note that the EU never made it to be obligatory in terms of all of those criteria to be fully realized before the summit, but then substantial progress had to be achieved. But in Tymoshenko's case, there was no progress achieved, and it became the stumbling point for the decision-making process, basically, for Ukraine. Basically, what Russia did, that Russia became very vocal already a few months ago, saying that for Russia, association agreement of Ukraine with the EU is a problem, and that would mean that Russia had to not retaliate, but then technically yes, retaliate, basically taking countermeasures against Ukraine, basically not having any preferential treatment with Ukraine when it comes to the pricing of the energy resources, including gas, obviously, that Ukraine is receiving from Russia, asking for repayment of the debts, having trade restrictions with Ukraine, potentially freedom of movement restriction for the labor force as well. They even went that far that they mentioned some potential of separatism in Ukraine that could happen. So basically, Russia's calculus was to scare Yanukovych, saying that basically, if he would make this decision in the short term, he would have had a lot of problems, deterioration in economy, political unrest. And in that sense, in the short-term perspective, that would mean that he would have zero chances for re-election, if not losing power perhaps prior to that. But then for re-election, pretty much no chances. Whereas if he would sign association agreement, potential profit would come much later, because the process with the EU, even the free trade agreement, it needs time before actual benefits are felt by the people in terms of electorate. So Russia made it sort of a hard decision for a corrupt politician like Yanukovych is to make decisions that would have been more of a long-term decision for the profit, for the benefit of the country, rather than something in the way that he has done. Now, what was the Russian reaction after this decision? It's very, very interesting because now Putin had statement as if Russia had never problem of Ukraine getting closer with the EU, and it's only NATO that Russia has problems with. Classical statements Russians were saying prior to 2013 when they became very vocal about Ukraine signing association agreement. So yeah, I mean that's where it all stands, and that's part of the reasoning, I guess, why it all happened in the way it happened.